Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Breaking Brews Podcast, a podcast focused on the business side of beer and what's driving today's thriving craft beer industry. Whether you're one of the thousands of people making craft beer what it is today, or just love great beer and want to know more about it, this show is here to cover everything from sales, marketing, branding, culture, and much, much more. The Breaking Brews Podcast delivers real-life scenarios and experiences from industry professionals that will help your beer knowledge evolve. To tap into more great beer content, visit breakingbrews.com today. And now, the moment you've been waiting for. Let's get this session started. All right, boys and girls, gather round. It is time for Session 2 of the Breaking Brews Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Cercone, and we are rolling through release week with 5 new sessions of the Breaking Brews Podcast coming your way over the next 5 days. This is day number 2, and today we are talking Cicerone certification with Brian Reed, who is one of only 18 Master Cicerones in the world. And you're going to get to hear Brian's journey from the very beginning of the Cicerone certification right through the master level and the just 2 days of pure hell that he went through getting that certification. I should say it's obviously a lot more than 2 days. There's a ton of preparation that goes into getting to that master level, and Brian tells the whole story. So if you've been considering taking the Cicerone certification at any level, this is going to be a great podcast for you to listen to because Brian breaks down each level and what you have to go through of establishments out there that are having their employees take the first level of the Cicerone certification. And it just gives them a very basic knowledge of craft beer, but it helps them present beer to customers in a much more educational way and much more informative way. So it's great that more places are starting to realize the importance of beer and how much consumers like to know about the liquid that they're about to consume. So you're going to hear, again, all about that today. If you want to find Brian online, you can check him out on Instagram and Twitter at Brian is Beering. And he's also got some really cool classes for our listeners here in Pittsburgh coming up on Saturday, April 6th and Sunday, April 7th at 11th Hour Brewing. On Saturday, April 6th, he's going to be teaching an off-flavor course. And on Sunday, April 7th, he's going to be doing a beer savvy boot camp. So if you want to know more about beer, these are 2 classes that you absolutely need to check out. Jump over to the 11th Hour Brewing Facebook page and check out the events section, and you'll see both events, and you can get all the information that you need. Should be a great, informative time. Hope to see you there. Now, as we are rolling into the meat of today's show, just a quick reminder about the contest that's running throughout release week. We are doing a giveaway of a $100 Visa with. All you need to do is jump over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Rate and review the show. Also share an episode on Instagram and or Twitter with the hashtag BBPod and tag Breaking Brews Co. That's Breaking Brews CO. And doing those 2 things will get you entered to win the prize. So please provide some honest feedback, rate the show, review the show, share an episode with a friend. Tell your friends and family. Obviously can't gauge that, but if you do the first 2 things in a digital capacity, you'll be entered to win the prize. So let's dive in to Session 2 with Brian Reed. This is the Breaking Brews Podcast. Let's do this. All right, well, we are here with Mr. Brian Reed, and Brian is one of 18 Master Cicerones in the world. Brian, welcome to the Breaking Brews Podcast, my friend.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be back, yeah.
I'm glad to have something that I feel is going to stick. You were part of the failed Breaking Brews Experience video series that just did not take off the way I hoped. But
so you're blaming my aesthetics personally for the failure of that project, is what you're saying.
You maybe 15% to 20% of the blame falls on you.
Right,
and the rest of it's all on my
I'll
shoulders.
Shoulder 15%.
I learned a lot in those 4 episodes about Facebook Live and learned that podcasting is much more fun. We don't have to look good. I mean, we can just be bust out. And
that's ideal for me.
Yeah, well, here we are. So today we are going to tap into Brian's basically, the fact that we have a Master Cicerone in Pittsburgh is pretty damn cool. And he does a lot in the beer scene, not so much just in Pittsburgh, but pretty spread out. That knowledge obviously is not wasted. And today we want to help those of you that are listening learn more about the Cicerone certification program, tap into what it's all about, how it can help you, and if it's something that you've been considering obtaining, you can learn a great deal from Brian because he's gone the full way through. So before we get into that, I'd like Brian to tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into the beer world, what drew you into the craft beer industry, and then ultimately what made you decide to go down that road to get your certification.
Yeah, I've been in beer, I guess, for, one way or another, I guess for a little over a decade now, which sounds silly to say, but I guess it's true. I started out actually first homebrewed, when I was, I think maybe 16 years old. My uncle was kind of into it, and would do the kind of extract kits that you would get online or from Northern Brewer or whatever. And he kind of lost focus on the hobby, and then me and my cousin, who's my age, in the summertime, we were off school and unsupervised, we would make these extract kits because people would keep buying them for him for like Father's Day and stuff, and he would just like leave them on the shelf, so we would start brewing them. And they were generally god-awful because we didn't really follow the directions, we didn't really sanitize anything properly, but that was kind of my first introduction to home brewing. And then I got a little bit more into it when I was in college, something my dad and I started picking up, as a hobby when I was, home on the weekends or whatever. I grew up just actually right up the road from where we're at now, which is in Fombell, Pennsylvania, which is in, kind of the Beaver Lawrence County border area. And I went to Youngstown State University for undergrad. So, quick little drive home on the weekends oftentimes. And we'd brew beer and stuff. And I started getting more serious after college and, started brewing, all grain batches. And then started entering competitions, decided I wanted to get become a certified BJCP judge. And then from there, started trying to weasel my way into the beer business, working and volunteering as, packaging. I remember repacking variety packs for Full Pint when they contract brewed stuff for Rivertown. Mm-hmm. And I would go help them package at Full Pint, would help Scott at East End for like packaging days. I would just try to like volunteer my time to get some experience and kind of meet some people, hopefully wherever I could. And I started, developing a relationship with folks and kind of, I guess, a reputation for being okay at tasting beer and things like that. So I ended up doing some freelance writing. Eventually, Tim Russell, who owns Maggie's Farm Distillery, Tim was starting Craft Pittsburgh at the time, mm-hmm. and he was actually the first person to ever pay me for anything beer related, which was writing articles, and then eventually gave me a homebrew column, and then I got to write for Beer Advocate magazine, and wrote an article for Brew Your Own magazine, and eventually got a brewing job at a place called Copper Kettle Brewing Company, which is near Huff's in Greenfield, owned by the Huff's family there. I think they're actually kind of rebranding it now, last thing I heard.
I believe that's, by the time this podcast is available, I believe it's going to be something completely different.
Yeah, it was like, because they have another space now, but it was like a brew on premises kind of unique concept where you could come in and brew your own beer, and then we brewed beer for the pub, and it was a really, really fun learning experience there. And then eventually, I finished grad school at Point Park, and got a job with Miller Coors, calling on wholesalers all around Pennsylvania. So doing like seasonal, forecasting and ride withs and all that sort of stuff. Calling on Wilson McGinley and Fuhrer and Glenwood up in Erie and mm-hmm. Verastro out in Scranton, all over the state really, which was a great learning experience. And then eventually got a job as a beer educator, where I got became a certified beer server, which is the first level I'm sure we'll get into, then eventually a certified Cicerone. Became a beer educator for Miller Coors, moved to Milwaukee, so spent a lot of time between Milwaukee and Chicago for a few years there. Then I moved over to start covering off support for our national account chain team, and now I'm in channel marketing. So I've been bouncing around, but I'm fortunate enough to be able to work from home here in
and still with Miller Coors today.
Yeah. I'm in a channel marketing role, still working with a lot of those same big grocery chains and stuff like that. Doing some education stuff, but also doing programming around anything flavor centric, intrinsic beer centric, and then a lot of beer and food programming for some of those retailers.
So you've clearly seen a lot in all of your travels.
I've been fortunate enough to work in a lot of different capacities. I was on innovation team for Jacob Leinenkugel Brewing Company for a while. Still get to be involved with some innovation projects and pilot brewing and things like that. So being able to garner a pretty wide depth of experience, weasel my way into enough things to learn some hopefully diverse skills. I also teach classes for Cicerone now as well. So I've done a couple here in Pittsburgh. Actually, coincidentally, I just talked to Keena and Matt at 11th Hour down in Lawrenceville, and we are going to do a couple of classes here, probably like March and April time frame, somewhere around there. So we don't have dates yet. I'm going to meet with them next week and figure out how many people we can fit in there and all that sort of thing. So if anybody's interested in classes, I'll plug them at the end.
Yeah.
No, I think it should be fun. We're going to be able to accommodate a lot of people in there. They have a nice big space. So
I'd have to believe there's a lot of people out there. I mean, whether you're listening to this in Pittsburgh or anywhere, you may be considering going down that road to build your knowledge, but it could be a little intimidating.
Yeah.
So a class like that could really help open the floodgates, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it's, especially, so there's two different classes that I teach. One of them is a 90-minute off-flavor course. The first time I taught them, this was back in I guess it was like back in the summer, actually. I was planning on teaching some in the fall, and just things got really hectic with work, and I didn't get an opportunity to do it. But we taught them at Beerport in Lawrenceville, and it's a pretty small, cozy space in there, so we could only accommodate about 20 people. But we sold out both classes pretty quick, and there's obviously been demand. A lot of folks reaching out, so I'm eager to see how many people we can get in there because they have a much bigger space at 11th Hour. But there was a 90-minute off-flavor course that we do that was mostly brewers from around town that signed up for that, which was really cool. And then the second one is a 4-hour, what they call a Beer Savvy Boot Camp, which is really for people who are preparing to take either the first or second level Cicerone exams.
Yeah, we back in late 2018, some of the homebrewers and I did an off-flavor course. They're probably a lot more condensed than what you were offering, but it was very interesting to see just the reactions. And me personally, I was there more as a student than I was any kind of educator. But Chris and Sean and Gregor from the Trube Club all came out to Spoonwood, and we had probably a group of about 15 people that showed up for it. And it's just crazy when you really dive into that and you start to actually get that firsthand knowledge of like, holy shit, like this is just
when you start going like, well, I've tasted that before, haven't I?
Yeah.
You're like, kind of start to connect those dots a little bit. The nice thing about doing these classes or doing it like a group, like you were talking about, I always advise people is folks reach out who are preparing for some level of the program, and they're always like, any tips on like off-flavor training without having to buy those Aroxa tablets, right? And Siebel offers similar like off-flavor tablets you can get, I believe, too, or capsules rather. And I'm always like, not really. I mean, it's honestly the best way to do it. What I always advise people is just get a group because they are expensive.
Yeah.
Get a group, buy one of the kits that are catered to whatever level of the exam, or even if you're not doing the exam, just look the list of flavors that are involved and you can pick one of them. But they are expensive. But if you get enough people to split it, it's totally reasonable because they can facilitate tasting for a lot of people.
Yeah, you're not going to... I mean, we were using growlers, and that was enough to feed the group.
Yeah, you only need an ounce or so.
Yeah, you're not going to want to drink much of that infected beer.
Well, and most of them are you get them via retronasal. You get them via orthonasal, which is just kind of giving it a sniff, right? You don't need the retronasal. You don't need the palate sensation necessarily on a lot of them. A lot of them you can just sniff it and get the idea. There are certain ones, especially once you get into the advanced and Master Cicerone training, that are actual tastes that you need to actually consume it to get things like different levels of sourness and things like that. But metallic is one of them. You're not going to be able to smell in most cases, but a lot of them you can just give them a sniff, and that ounce is plenty.
Yeah, and having that knowledge is very helpful because there's sometimes. I mean, I know I've done it on a few occasions where I've pulled the bartender aside and been like, "Hey," some of them appreciate it. Some of them are like, "Who the hell are you to tell me that our beer isn't tasting good?" But then they taste it like, "Oh, okay, yeah, you're right. This is
it's
not good."
it's a tricky conversation. It's a delicate conversation sometimes. And if it's someone that I know and is looking for I guess productive feedback, constructive feedback, then I feel more comfortable doing that. Sometimes if it's a place that I don't know and I get something bad and I don't care about, I'd rather, frankly, in this, for better or for worse, I just kind of avoid the conversation. It's like, I'm probably not going to come back here. But there are a lot of other instances where I've been like, I like this place, I want to come back, and sometimes I'll just kind of shoot an email to management like later type of thing, instead of like kind of interrupting them during the dinner rush and going, hey, you got dirty lines or whatever. But like, you can be a little bit more delicate. And, when they're drinking their coffee the next morning, they can get that email instead of while they're being swamped with customers.
That makes sense. Yeah. That me, I'd be just calling me.
What the hell is this?
What are you guys doing?
Dump it out. Yeah.
So are there any trends and happenings in the beer world right now that are just making you scratch your head and make you want what the hell's going on here?
I don't know. Scratch my head. I think the sense of confusion about certain trends have kind of like went to the wayside. I think it probably, and this is an annoying thing to bring up at this point because it's kind of came and went already. But I think when we hit glitter beer, I was kind of like, I don't think anything's going to surprise me at this point, which I didn't have an issue with it. I thought it was kind of, bizarre, but it's fun and whimsical. And if it helps you to like beer better, by all means, put glitter in your beer.
There you go.
But I think at that point, I'm like, you know what? I don't think anything's going to surprise me at this point. You know what I mean? Now that we're talking glitter beer, but
that trend died rather quickly, though.
It was.
I haven't seen a lot of glitter beer
novelty. I think the idea is it didn't really lend any.
That didn't do anything for flavor.
It was just an aesthetic thing, which was cool, I guess. But yeah, it was hot shit for a sec.
Yes, it was.
The I'm so my New Year's resolution. We have a Facebook group thread that's got like me and a handful of friends, some of which we were just talking about a few minutes ago, who are brewers and work in the beer business around town and stuff, and we just kind of message each other throughout the day, just like when we're trying to not do work and things like that. And
so you guys talk often.
Yeah, pretty regularly throughout the day. But this was kind of my there's a couple of us that are really kind of, I guess, curmudgeonly when it comes to beer, where it's like, I just want my Helles and my Pilsner and my English porter and shut the hell up about everything else kind of thing. But I've been making a big effort in the last few months to kind of open up my horizons and go in and order things that I normally wouldn't order. And when I'm going to a bottle shop or whatever, pick up things I normally wouldn't pick up. And I can honestly say it's definitely reignited a little passion for me, especially around the holidays. I know myself, I get a little burned out because you're drinking a lot of beer, going to a lot of events, probably overindulging and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, so you take some people do the dry January and all that. I don't generally do that, but yeah, kind of just going out there and grabbing things that I'm like, I would never buy this in a million years. You pick it up. I've really surprised myself with the things that I've started to develop an enjoyment of.
What stands out in that category?
Yeah, I mean, so a couple of different things. I love sour beers. I've always loved sour beers, especially kind of like goose and fruited lambic style beers and things like that. But recently I've been reaching out for a bunch of like these fruited lactose sour beers.
Yeah.
Which is not stuff that I necessarily would reach for normally. I usually like the really spritzy, dry, almost more tannic kind of barrel-aged sour beers.
I will say there's been arguments that the hazy, juicy IPAs could potentially be a bridge into the more hoppy IPAs. I don't necessarily subscribe to that, but I could. There's might be a small argument for those lactose fruited sours to be maybe a slight gateway into more of the.
There's some ones that are kind of hop forward too, right? You can do like this. I mean, I've had some pretty enjoyable, sour IPAs and fruited sour IPAs and all that sort of thing. The hazy IPAs are normally a beer, for a while I was kind of resistant to. I mean, I tried them. I had plenty that I really liked, and there was just, I would say, realistically, like 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 of the ones I tried I really did not like. Okay. And namely, they were because they were the, ones that kind of leaned on the edge of like having this really grassy, astringent hop character. So I find that more challenging to drink than something that's 70, 80, 90, 100 IBUs.
Yeah.
I just had a Nugget Nectar last night, which it's like 80 or 90 IBUs, isn't it? It's pretty.
Is it that
up
high?
there? Maybe it's 70.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I thought it was a little bit lower than
I have
that.
to check it. It was something like that. But I was I hadn't had one in a while. I picked up a case a little, when it first came out, and now I'm super curious. Not to get off on the topic here, but I'm definitely going to look it up. A pretty aggressively hop forward beer, 93 IBUs.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was that high.
I think the only reason I remember it is because I was surprised to see that.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like
7.5%, 93 IBUs. Now, IBUs only tell you a
Interesting.
small part of the equation, right? Perceived bitterness is kind of a bigger thing than just IBUs.
Certainly.
But it is a firmly bitter beer. Like, there's no, escaping that. It's an aggressively bitter beer. But
not to that degree. At least in the way that
it drinks well. So
enjoy that beer.
there's some Maillard kind of browning components. There's a little bit of residual sugars. Like I said, it kind of tamps down a little bit of that perceived bitterness. But I on really grassy, like stinging astringency, hazy IPAs that are like 30, 20 IBUs, but they have that super like over extracted grassy kind of tannic hop presence. But then when someone nails it, they're fantastic. So I kind of have what I've been doing is I go to Vintage Estates over in Boardman quite a bit because I'm near the Ohio border there, or I go to JR's in Rochester's nearby, and they kind of have a little section where you can buy single bottles, or I'll grab a couple 4-packs of some hazy IPA that I've not had before. And I said I still get burned quite a bit, but when you nail one, it's pretty. It's a style that I struggled with for a while, but I'm gaining a liking for.
It's what the kids love these days.
I know,
that's
it's what's
for
hot
sure.
in the streets. That's what I'm told.
Yeah, that's the word on the street, my friend. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the Cicerone program. So, give us some background. What is it? Why was it created? How does it help make the beer industry better?
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got a lot of background and a lot of knowledge on it, so fire away.
Yeah. So it's a program. I guess it's almost 11. Let me think about this. I went to the 10th anniversary party in Chicago. I think that was this past year. So going on 11 years old at this point. So a gentleman by the name of Ray Daniels. Probably heard of him if you've been around beer for a while. Really well-known author, and started as a home brewer, and then eventually was involved in brewers publications. Like I said, he was a well-known kind of industry personality and author. And I think kind of the way he tells it is anybody who has looked at the sommelier program in the wine world that has anything to do with beer has said, why don't we have something like this with beer? And there have been people that have kind of tried with certain certification programs and things like that over the years. But he laid it out in a really kind of digestible, organized way. I think got the word out there about it pretty well. And it's kind of become the industry standard from a professional certification standpoint. So there, for the longest time, were 3 levels to the program. There was the first level is called Cicerone Certified Beer Server, and that's an online, 60-question online multiple choice exam. It's really designed for people, a lot of retailers, a lot of wholesalers, a lot of beer adjacent industries use that as kind of something to get people up to speed, so that they can speak knowledgeably and confidently about beer with consumers, right? So, sometimes they'll do some sort of training support, and then part of your onboarding is, at the end of it, after 6 months or whatever, you take the CBS exam. I do a lot of trainings with, retailers and wholesalers alike, kind of preparing them for that first level exam. And then the second level is called Certified Cicerone, or the Certified Cicerone exam, and that's an in-person one. It's a pretty big jump up in terms of complexity. There's a tasting component, which is intimidating for a lot of folks. You're kind of put on the spot in terms of off-flavor identification, style identification.
Now, do you do this blind, or do you see the beer in front of you when you're doing that portion?
So there's a couple different ways that they do it, and I would say both. Like in some instances, what you're tasting, and you're looking for some, they do something called fit to serve, which is like, here's the beer, this is the brand, should you be tasting it, right? And you don't necessarily have to have intimate knowledge of that brand to be able to be successful with that one, but then they do off-flavor identification, and it is, that portion's obviously blind. there's a small presentational aspect to it, and then there's multiple choice, fill in the blank, essay type of thing. So it's like a, half a day type of exam or several hour exam. And then the next level, which it used to jump right from there to Master Cicerone, which was like an insane jump. So
is that how you experienced it?
Yeah,
jumping right. Okay.
Yeah, it was an insane jump to the point where like the failure rate was like way up over 90%. Because it was just such an enormous jump, and people were caught off guard by it. And then so they added an intermediate level between certified and master called Advanced Cicerone, which is the newest level. But there's still, I think, well up over 100 people who've passed the Advanced Cicerone exam now. It's been a couple of years now since they started, or maybe even a few years now. And that is like a full day exam, similar to what you'd expect from the certified level, but you really need to start to get into a pretty detailed, intimate knowledge of the brewing process. You start getting into some pretty science-heavy topics. Obviously, the tasting exam is much more involved. A lot more thrown at you. And then the Master Cicerone is that, but again, kind of taken to a problematic level.
Injecting the steroids.
Yeah, and it's a 2 full day exam, and it's just designed to put a lot of stress on you and really put you through the ringer and have you walking out feeling like you've went through 12 rounds. Yeah.
What's the night like in between?
It's the longest night there is. So people always say like, oh, the night leading up to it, the night before is horrible. The night in between's the worst because it's, for me, it's not. Some people are like, "Oh, such a fun experience." I was like, "It was not fun." For me, it was not fun.
Yeah, it
was
seems
stressful.
It seems like finals week.
So there are components of it that are kind of fun and enjoyable, but for me, it was. So I took it 3 times. Mm-hmm. So the first time I took it, you need an 85 to pass, and I got like an 83.4, 83.6, something like that. It was like,
oh, that had to be frustrating.
So that was frustrating, but I went in thinking like, wow, like just getting bombarded and just kind of trying to keep my head above water. And I was really surprised that I did that well the first time. And then the second time I was like, well, I only have to do that last little bit, better. But then I actually did worse the second time. And now thinking back, like meeting a bunch of the Master Cicerones now and talking to some of the examiners and to Ray about it and stuff, they're like, yeah, that's like almost always the case. Because you just come in maybe a little bit overconfident, or maybe, I don't know what it is. For me, I came in like an absolute just ball of nerves. Like I was just, a freaking ticking time bomb. You know what I mean? I was just a disaster of a human being.
And I'd have to assume for that test, you're on your own. Like there's not a lot of people in the room with you, like that are also taking the test that are in the same boat. Like this is just you.
Well, so they usually about 20, 25 people take it at the same time.
The master level?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And they split it up between 2 groups. So one person's spending the entire morning doing essays. The other person is doing all the oral examinations or verbal exams where they just put you in a room with whoever the expert is on that topic. So like you walk into a room and it's John Mallet from Bell's. If anybody knows who John Mallet is, he's like one of the most kind of well-known operations brewery guys out there. He literally wrote the Brewers Association ingredient, what do they call it, the Brewing Essentials series, which is a malt book, yeast book, hop book, water book. He wrote the malt book.
Okay.
So the guy knows a little bit about malt, and you just are in the room with him, and it's like, all right, here's some malts. We're going to blind taste them. We're going to talk about them, blah, blah, blah. Or, it's beer and food with Randy Mosier or something like that, right? So it's obviously designed to be pretty intimidating. And so they split the groups up in that way. So you do that stuff as well as tasting, and then the essays are swapped for the afternoon for the people who did all that stuff in the morning, and then you do the whole thing again the next day. So it's stressful, it's exhausting, and then to answer your question, the middle way through that first night, you're like, I don't want to go do that again. You know what I mean? Like your body is like telling you run away type of thing. But obviously it's the third time I did considerably better than the first 2 times. So I'm proud to say I scored really well the third time, but by that point, like I said, you just want to be done with it.
Caliente Pizza and Draft House is home to championship pizza. And that's not just a tagline, you guys. They've been awarded Best Pizza in the World 3 times at the International Pizza Expo and will soon be traveling to Parma, Italy to participate in the World Pizza Championships. Caliente Pizza and Draft House is known for top-notch beer selection and pizza made with the freshest ingredients each and every day. With 5 locations in Bloomfield, Hampton Township, Mount Lebanon, Aspinwall, and their newest location in Monroeville, there's no escaping Caliente no matter what part of Pittsburgh you visit. Hop over to pizzadrafthouse.com today and check out their full menu, draft list, and all the great things the World Pizza Champions have in store for you. Now, did you want a beer when it was over, or were you just like, fuck no, I need a break?
So after the first day, a little bit of the nerves kind of wear out. Mm-hmm. You're still exhausted, but a little bit of the nerves wear out. So you definitely go out, maybe have a couple of beers that night, get a good meal in your belly, and just try to be able to sleep. And then the next day, after you're done, now you're not thinking about getting through it. You're thinking about how'd I do.
Yeah, that's where that's why I was asking about that for that night in between. That's where I'd be laying there, just be like, fuck, did I do that part right? Or did I could have done this, do it all again? Oh my God. Yeah.
You're kind of like, for me, I can only speak to my own experience and to some, people that I know that have taken it. And it's definitely like you almost develop these weird little mental defense mechanisms against that sort of thing where you're just like, no, stop thinking about that. Stop it. Can't go back. Just, because I'd already experienced, months of second guessing myself, years of second guessing myself, the first 2 times I took the exam. So like I said, you almost kind of develop the skill set of just like shoving that stress way down in deep. And, I'm sure that's taking hours and days at a time off my life. But the problem is you then have to wait a couple of months for your results.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, because and that's the toughest part because obviously you're writing a ton of essays. So like now I guess they're starting to do it where you type your answers out on a computer. When I took it all 3 times it was handwritten. So
that is old school.
So at one point I was doing, I think I wrote 80 some pages handwritten, over the course of those 2 days. So somebody's got to read all that chicken scratch and grade it. And now I help grade the exams, so I've seen a little bit on the other end of this peek under the tent a little bit, I guess. And it takes a little bit of time.
Sure.
So of course they send them out to folks to grade. And then they have to tabulate everything, and then they have to call everybody. And Ray calls everybody individually, so it takes a little time.
Pass or fail, he gives them
a fail.
Okay,
yeah, pass or fail.
So if someone were to fail, what's the word of advice when he gives them a call?
Yeah, I think he'll talk. So I've experienced it. He told me where you did well, where you came up a little bit short, and just basically said, you need to do a little bit better in this category. The second time I did really well in the places I did poorly the first time, and I think I overcorrected a little bit. The first time, it's time management is such a huge aspect of it, especially when writing the essays. And the first time I did it, I just ran out of time, and I ended up leaving like almost one whole essay blank, which is really hard to come back from.
Yeah.
Right. So the next time I'm just like, but I did well pretty much across the board. Otherwise, I almost passed even with that being the case. So I said, I'm just going to get it. I'm just going to finish. And again, I think I overcorrected a little bit where, some of the feedback the second time around was like, need more detail in this, need more detail. And I'm like, yeah, it's a classic case of kind of overcorrecting. So,
yeah. Now, are you timed for those essay parts?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
that's honestly the hardest part
Yeah.
is you have to do, I don't know, I'm blanking now on how many it is, 6 or 8 essay questions in a certain amount of time, and it's just not enough time to really completely write them out and think them through.
I'd have to figure with something as subjective as this is that you could go off on a lot of different ways, and no matter what, you're going to fill that time.
Yeah,
sure.
And that's by design. And they can sniff out, the people who are grading these exams can sniff out a bullshitter pretty quick.
Yeah.
So that's almost like one word of advice I always tell people who are preparing for that, or even the advanced Cicerone, is don't bullshit. Don't try to bullshit, because the people who are taking the exam are going to know that.
Right.
And they're going to see through you kind of stumbling and trying to fill up a page. So just try to get everything down there you need. Answer the question. That sounds like stupid advice. Of course you answer the question, but I can't tell you how many times somebody gets off on a tangent, and because they don't have a little outline or whatever that they've jotted down, they're in left field and then trying to pull it back to the actual answer. I'm like, you just wrote 4 paragraphs about something that's unrelated, and you could have spent that time elsewhere. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So answer the question in front of you. That's when I learned the hard way too.
And we should ask too, because you've received this phone call. What's the phone call like when you pass?
So it's every bit as stressful until they did. So I'm in a documentary, right? They followed me around preparing for it the second time.
Oh, what's that?
It's called Brewmaster.
Okay.
It is on. I think it's on pretty much all video on the cable video on demand. So if you go to like your on demand button on your cable remote, it's on there for I don't know $3.99 or $6.99 or
that's
something
great.
like that.
Awesome.
But it'll be. I mean, people that are from the company are going to be mad hearing me telling me say this, but I think it's common knowledge now is it's going to be on Amazon Prime streaming for free, I think in March.
Hell yeah. So depending on when you're listening to this podcast, Brewmaster might already be live
It's
on
also
Amazon
the
Prime.
people who made it, it's an independent film company. A guy named Doug Tarola directed it. He's a great guy, super passionate guy. So if you don't mind spending the $3.99 or whatever, I'm sure Doug would appreciate that too if you want to see it. But my thread is one of the. It's like this overall thing about like evolution of beer in the United States and beer culture and all that. People, myself, preparing for this exam, and then this other guy, Drew, who's a guy who's like kind of trying to start a brewery. Anyway, so the second time I took it, they were following me around. So there were like cameras and stuff, like following me around. And
as if you didn't have enough
studying
pressure, right?
At my house. This is when I lived in Milwaukee, and like studying at my house and got to a pretty obscene point. But the last time I took it, they wanted me to record it. So I later went when I passed it. I mean, obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, you've already got the spoiler that I eventually passed it because in the exam, the second time I failed in the film.
Yeah.
And then my wife had the foresight to take some pictures of me when I was on the phone with Ray the third time when I did pass. And I'd done really well, and I knew what it felt like to come close. So the third time, I was pretty confident that I had passed, but you have no idea, right? Because I was kind of confident the second time, too.
Sure.
So think how far that got me. She had some pictures of me. It was a little bit of a blur, but in retrospect, I've done some events around the documentary and other stuff with Ray since then. And I was talking to him about it, and I said, you really strung me along that third conversation, because we got on the phone and his tone, he's a very kind of like serious, kind of like almost deadpan type of guy.
Yeah.
And when he's explaining it to me, I thought with the tone he was at, I definitely failed again. And he strung it out. He's like, well, you did all right on this one. You did really good on this one. So that's a 90. Then you got a 95 on this. And I mean, when you do the math, it comes out to an 87 point whatever. And I was like, the tone was you failed, but
right.
the 87, like for a moment, my brain's not really matching up. I know he is, and he thought it was so goddamn funny when I was telling him about it. He was like, I love doing that. I was like, you're just a
he holds
evil
all
human
the power
being.
in that conversation.
Oh yeah, he's a sadistic human being in that sense, but. So it was obviously very exciting and emotional, and especially after spending 3-4 years preparing for this goddamn thing.
Yeah. Well, so as beer continues to grow and evolve, do you think more people outside of the beer industry will start to go down that path, or do you think this is something that's more specific to people that are working within the industry?
So I guess beer adjacent fields, certainly. I can't imagine for the life of me why you would want to put yourself through like the advanced or master level if you don't either have a really deep passion for beer, work in beer, or aspire to work in beer. But I can imagine, so I can say that I've learned a lot about flavor and about sensory in general, that I could some writing on the side in the past with, around like spirits and other things like that, and my sensory training in beer through the Cicerone and through other avenues as well has definitely made me a better taster at large, not just in beer. So in that sense, I think first 2 levels, but like I said, once you get into the 3rd level and obviously the 4th, putting yourself through that and the commitment it takes, I mean, the hundreds of hours that you have to spend studying to just get to a baseline level of preparedness.
Yeah.
If you don't work in beer, aspire to work in beer, or just hugely passionate about beer, that might be a psychotic move. I don't know.
Do you think there's, because I'm thinking about this in my head, like, do you think there's any element to this that, okay, I've gotten this far, I want to see if I can do the next level, and then, oh man, I've gotten this far.
Yeah. I mean, for me, there was definitely that. I had, there's a couple of guys that I was studying alongside with, so I was super fortunate to be studying alongside have a group of folks that we were studying together and could kind of help each other out. All that tasting sessions together and stuff like that. Both. One of them is a guy named Jason Pratt, who's my former boss, a good stream innovations for us. So from Miller Coors, we're the only organization in the world that has. Pretty proud of that. And Jason's just kind of a phenom. Like from a sensory perspective, he is the closest thing to just kind of a freak of nature that you'll find. He's so good. Myself and then another coworker of mine, also another former boss of mine. He's now the general manager of the Blue Moon Rhino Brewery in Denver, a guy named Dan Imdek. Dan and I think, are kind of on a similar level from like a sensory perspective, right? And we both have our strengths and weaknesses and whatnot, but pushing each other and being competitive with one another, and then obviously having Jason, who passed before us, and being able to sit there and practice tasting with someone who's as talented as him, it just pushes you like crazy. So it's just like any, we're all three of us are competitive guys, so that went a long way too. But or any other activity, a sport or something like that, you're going to be a better artist, you're going to be a better athlete or whatever when you're around people that push you.
Right.
Back in my skateboarding days, when I was a kid, I remember that was always the thing. You wanted to skate with the people that were really good because they were going to push you to get better, just out of sheer competitive nature.
Yeah. You've obviously been to a lot of different places and you've seen a lot of different behaviors and a lot of different levels of expertise. Do you think the certification program, even the lowest level, is something that more breweries and tap rooms and restaurants and bars need to focus on? Because there are some people out there that, you can tell they just don't give a shit.
Yeah. If you've been to, anybody who's listening to this that's been to GABF, that's been to the Craft Brewers Conference, that's been to, I was fortunate enough to speak at the Brewers of Pennsylvania, what was the Mid-Atlantic Brewers Symposium in the latter part of last year. And any conference like that you go to, there's always a big emphasis on quality and service, because those two things are a bit of a threat to our industry right now. So the quality aspect of it, when you have breweries coming online at the rate that we have them coming online now, I think I heard recently we're over 8,000 breweries open in the United States.
Open?
Not even
That's
including
crazy.
Planning. I think we actually just hit the 8,000 mark. I just heard that. I have to...
Last I had heard was, and again, whenever you're hearing this number could have been doubled.
Yeah.
But I had heard 72 recently. So 8,000 is not anywhere outside the
That
realm
might
of
include
possibility.
Planning, but whoever told me this told me we just hit 8,000 breweries open for business.
I could totally see it.
Yeah. In any
Absolutely.
case, the point is it's like an insane amount, right?
Yeah.
So when you have that many coming online, you're going to have bad breweries. That's just the fact of the matter. And hopefully the market will kind of either force them to get better or they'll die. That's just a callous way of thinking about it maybe, but that's reality. We all know that brewery that we went in and we're like, I can't believe I just spent money on that, on those beers, right? Obviously, you don't want that to happen, but hopefully there's a huge emphasis on quality now. The Brewers Association, you go to the website, there's a pretty impressive amount of resources. When I started brewing, starting seriously getting into brewing and trying to make it a career and things like that, 8-10 years ago, there was so few resources out there. Now, like the Master Brewers Association of the Americas has a podcast. I think it's called the Master Brewers Podcast. That is incredibly good. Like, just you look at you want to hear a topic on, an hour discussion on dissolved oxygen, boom, you got it. You know what I mean? You want to have an hour, 45-minute discussion on troubleshooting acetaldehyde, boom, you got it.
Yeah,
so,
in other words, there's really no excuse.
No, the resources are there
Exactly.
like I said, between organizations like them, the Brewers Association, and Siebel Institute and all this stuff. There's like an incredible amount of resources out there right now. So there's really no excuse to make bad beer. The thing that I think is people are getting out ahead of that, but I think one of the things that people struggle with now and are just starting to get their head wrapped around, and there's some breweries that are doing a really great job of this. I'll call out Cinderlands as one of them.
Yeah, Cinderlands here in Pittsburgh.
Is focusing on service.
For sure.
Like this, from the presentation of the beer to the cleanliness of the glassware to the specific pour that they're looking for a particular style.
First time I walked in there, that's exactly, I was
so
blown
impressed.
away. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
impressed. And there's more places that are doing a good job of that now. we were just talking about 11th Hour. Like they go in there and they have a bunch of different glassware for different styles, and they're poured properly, and the glassware's clean.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go into another place, and it's dirty shaker pints. And
Right.
I don't want to shit on shaker pints. Everybody's been doing that forever. But I've had some beautiful beers poured into shaker pints, but there's never an excuse for a dirty one, right? Mm-hmm. Or you go in there and the shaker pint or something like that. It's like, what's that doing for your brand? You know what I mean? So having a little bit more of a robust strategy around those types of things is going to have to be a sink or swim move for a lot of breweries in the near future.
Because I think that in addition to the beer, you're also cultivating an experience overall.
I mean,
and there are so
absolutely.
many places where you can go to experience good beer and good ambiance and something that's going to make you want to come back a second, third, fourth, fifth time.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be super elevated white tablecloth to just have a good experience.
No,
you know what I mean?
But there's those little elements that everybody's looking at, and now also everybody's got a platform to talk about it. They can go on Facebook, they can go on Untappd, they can go on Yelp, you name it. So yeah, you have to be on point with those things, and that is why I posed the question of, when you go to a place where you can tell that isn't being emphasized, it stands out.
Yeah.
And these days, it's going to hurt you in the long run.
One of the first things that you'll learn, if you're preparing for the Certified Beer Server exam, the first one is how to pour a beer, obviously, and how to maintain a clean, proper glassware cleaning protocol, and how to check to make sure that it is beer clean.
Yeah.
I mean, that alone sounds like such a simple thing, but add a tremendous amount of value.
Look at Instagram. Look at Facebook. You see some of these.
Here's the insane thing, and this is one thing that kind of pet peeve. I feel like I'm like a fucking morning shock jock. I'm like, what grinds my gears? No, but seriously, like, is social media accounts for breweries posting release pictures of their beers in dirty glasses?
Ugh.
Like, that's just, I get it. You're social media, you're a PR person, whatever. You're not necessarily, a beer expert.
But you should have, no, I don't buy that.
Yeah.
You should, if this is your industry, you should
know what a dirty glass looks like.
And that should also fall onto your ownership and your brewers to say, hold on, well, we can't post that.
Yeah,
and that's to do that.
Sometimes it's probably that symptom of, one left hand not talking to the right hand kind of thing. But still, it's just, that's, I guess, a pet peeve of mine. Like I said,
it's a good one.
I'm fighting. I'm 33, and I have the mentality of I think a 73-year-old. So like I'm always fighting my curmudgeonly instincts. But yeah, it drives me absolutely insane.
That's an easy tip, you guys. When you're even whether you are just an enthusiast that likes good beer and you post pictures, or you work in the industry and you're displaying your brand, do it in a clean glass.
Don't worry about how many inches of snow you're going to place the glass in, or what bubbling fucking brook that you're going to hunt for in the woods for 9 hours, and then you're going to put a dirty glass in it.
Some of these curmudgeon Facebook groups, when you see, I always, the second I see,
I love, like, don't drink beer and stuff. They always have, he's hilarious.
But there's always a couple people that I know personally, as soon as I see one of those pictures, I'm just like, wait and see, because they always have something good to see.
How deep in the woods did you hike to get a picture of a beer in a dirty glass?
Oh man. Well, let's bring it back around here, and we'll wrap up here in a few minutes. But for those that are looking to get started, maybe this isn't necessarily what they want to do first, but we had just talked about some good resources out there. If I just want to get a basic knowledge and have some just very ground level information that I could share with consumers or customers in front of me, what would you recommend?
You mean like from
books
or publications,
videos, podcast, anything that could help me?
Yeah. So the first book I always tell people to pick up, and it's I don't know, fourth, or I don't even remember what edition is out there now, but the new edition, there's like some updated graphics and things like that, is Tasting Beer by Randy Mosier. It's just such a great book.
Absolutely, I recommend as well.
It's just like, it's visually appealing because, it gets you in the mood to drink beer and learn about beer. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make it a chore. Again, I'm not ashamed to say there's pretty pictures too to look at, and which, again,
without dirty glasses.
The aesthetics get you in the mood to drink beer, right? Mm-hmm. Which makes it more enjoyable to learn about it. But it's just a super high-level introduction to a ton of different topics, including things like beer and food pairing, which people are really intimidated by. Obviously, styles, ingredients. It's just a great one. If you want to dig in a little bit deeper and maybe you are getting into home brewing or you're getting a little more serious about it or something like that, that Brewer's Element series that I talked about, it gets much, much deeper, but it's a really interesting series. I would especially suggest the Malt book by John Mallett, and then the Hop book by Stan Hieronymus are awesome. And then Chris White and Jamil Zainasheff did the Yeast book, which is great too. The Water book, I always joke, this is a shitty joke, but we're like, it's the driest book about water you can imagine. Water's just a really, I know, it's painful. I should throw myself off a bridge. But
it's not that bad. Damn, dude.
It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
Hams is kicking
It's
in
a pretty
over
bad
here.
pun. It's a pretty bad pun. But the case is, the reality is it's insanely dense. Like, I struggled to get through the Water book.
Was that another pun there? It's extremely dense.
No, it wasn't. I will not take responsibility for that one. But that's a great one. I love a book by Garrett Oliver called The Brewmaster's Table. Been around for a long time, but has really instructed the way like a whole generation of people talk about beer and food.
And that's pretty much an industry standard.
In a romantic way. One that I really, really love that has come out recently, which is, again, a much more niche topic, but there's a lot of folks interested in it recently, is Wood and Beer. And it's written by Dick Cantwell and Peter Boucard. So Dick Cantwell founded Elysian, and now he's kind of resurrected Magnolia Brewing out west, and just an insane. I've been fortunate enough to spend some time around him. He was an examiner for the Master Cicerone for me, and I've got to spend some time with him on a couple of occasions. He's just a wealth of knowledge and a great dude. And Peter Boucard from Rodenbach, and then later New Belgium, right? I believe
that's correct. That sounds right.
These guys are just like, I mean, as far as people that know a little bit about barrel aging beers, whether it be to inoculate them with microorganisms or whether it be to leach spirit flavors out or whatever, it's incredibly well researched book.
Well, as we get ready to wrap up here, Brian, let me put you on the spot with this question. So, is there any one piece of advice, and this may be hard to answer, but is there one piece of advice that you would give to anybody that's out there listening that's considering going for their certification?
Yeah, it depends on which level. I would say get hands-on experience. You know that you're lacking, right? So if you're a brewer, maybe you want to get some hands-on experience, hosting some beer and food events, putting something. Or doing draft tech troubleshooting, when you component. If you work in marketing or on the retail side of beer, brew beer. You know what I mean? So you really have to be pretty well-rounded, especially at the higher levels of the program. And hands-on experience goes an enormous way. Like when I'm grading exams, I'm looking for people who have clearly lived this and know and have experienced those weird little scenarios that you get into and how to work your way out of them or how to fix them or how to make things better, as opposed to people who have just read it out of a book. And that's a huge number of people that have reached out to me and said, like, hey, what do you suggest? All this stuff. I'm like, well, what do you do? And they tell me, and I was like, well, have you ever done this? No, but I've read this book. I'm like, that's kind of not going to do it. I mean, you can pretty much tell when somebody's just regurgitating stuff from a book. So I would say go out and have hands-on experiences, and first and foremost, brew beer. On a homebrew level, it's incredibly easy to get into homebrewing now with really, really low financial investment. Or if you work in the beer business or are friends with people in the beer business, you probably know somebody who already brews at home or has a small 3-barrel system or something at a brewery nearby that wouldn't mind helping you come in, and you can clean some kegs for them and they'll help you. They'll let you grain out. You can, watch them brew and get a feel for it and touch and feel and smell ingredients and have real experiences. I mean, you have to study. You got to memorize a lot of shit, but go out there and have real experiences. That'll shine through.
And to add to the homebrew level, many areas there are homebrew clubs.
Yeah.
Find a homebrew club. These guys are super helpful.
Yeah, I mean, we have Trash.
Yeah.
The Three Rivers Alliance for Serious Homebrews. We got True, which is Three Rivers Underground Brewers. Really robust homebrew scene. Here in Pittsburgh, there's one in Youngstown. There's one in Cleveland. There's homebrew. There's Bash, which is the Butler area.
Yeah.
Butler area.
Yeah, there's one in Butler.
Homebrewers.
Yeah, and You've got one in Westmoreland County as well.
Yeah, they're all over.
Yeah, and that's just our little nook here in Western Pennsylvania. There are all kinds of homebrew clubs around the country. So depending on where you're picking up this podcast at, that's a great way to learn too.
Go to the AHA website, the American Homebrewers Association website. I'm sure they have some sort of club directory on there that can get you pointed in the right direction.
No doubt about it. Brian, man, this has been great. Thank you for
happy to.
Yeah, this is. I think anybody that's been pondering the Cicerone, or whether you might be right in the middle of it right now.
Yeah, if now you are. Here's my shameless plug. I'm teaching classes, you guys. No, but we're going to teach a couple of classes at 11th Hour Brewing in Lawrenceville and Pittsburgh coming up. We figure out what those dates are and registration opens up and stuff like that. I guess I'll probably have you can go to the Cicerone website, just cicerone.org, and they'll have it on there when it's opened up. Otherwise, I'll post stuff about it on social media and things like that.
And I'll make sure when I know those dates too, I'll plug those through social media or directly on the page. But we might be able to even talk about it a little bit more on the podcast when that rolls around.
Like I said, I would like to get a nice big robust group in there, hopefully.
All right, Brian. Again, thanks a lot for taking some time. Again, and we'll talk to you again soon. Cheers. This session of the Breaking Brews Podcast is in the history books. Did you like what you heard? Help the show find the ears of more thirsty beer enthusiasts just like you. Subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. Drop a rating and review, and share every episode on Twitter and Instagram using the hashtag BBPod. That's BBPOD. Follow Breaking Brews on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube for daily content about your favorite adult beverage, and check out breakingbrews.com/podcast for updates on the show. We'll catch you on the next session of the Breaking Brews Podcast.